Alien CEO secretly follows single human dad, working double shifts. What she sees leaves her. Vera Nextari adjusted her holographic display with a flick of her slender blue fingers, the light reflecting off her iridescent skin as she studied the employee records. Her amber eyes narrowed at one particular file that had been nagging at her consciousness for weeks. Eric Walsh, she murmured, tracing the human's attendance record. Double shifts every day without fail. Perfect performance metrics, zero complaints, minimal social interaction. Too perfect. Too suspicious. As chief executive of Nextari Interstellar Holdings, the largest corporation on Vega Prime, Vera had built her empire on noticing what others missed. Her antenna twitched slightly, a tell her board members had learned to fear during negotiations. Computer display surveillance feed of Loading Bay 12. The screen flickered to show a broad-shouldered human male in stained coveralls, methodically loading cargo containers with practiced efficiency. His light brown hair was damp with sweat, strong arms flexing as he maneuvered heavy equipment with the ease that came from endless repetition. What caught her attention wasn't his impressive physique, though that certainly didn't escape her notice, but rather the quiet dignity in his movements. Most workers slouched, complained, took unauthorized breaks. Walsh worked with unwavering focus as if driven by some hidden purpose. Magnify his face, she commanded. The image zoomed in, revealing features that were handsome by both human and Vegarian standards. Strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of Earth's oceans. But those eyes carried something that made Vira's second heart skip, exhaustion layered over determination. He's hiding something, she decided. Her executive assistant, a thin Arcturian male, cleared his throat. Ms. Nextari, the Proxima delegation is waiting in conference room. Reschedule, she said without looking away from the screen. Tell them I've been called to an emergency board meeting. But there isn't a board. There will be if they keep questioning me, she snapped, rising from her desk. Have my personal transport ready in 20 minutes. After changing into nondescript civilian attire, a simple tunic and leggings that concealed her distinctive markings, Vera positioned herself near the employee exit. When Eric Walsh emerged at precisely 1900 hours, she followed at a careful distance. The human moved with purpose through the gleaming corporate sector of Vega Prime, then boarded a public transport headed toward the city's outer rings. As the transport descended into increasingly dilapidated districts, Vira's curiosity only intensified. What business could a human have in the notorious Blue Sector? The area was home to the poorest of Vega Prime's residents, mostly refugees from the Orion conflict. The streets narrowed as they entered the district, buildings crumbling around them like rotting teeth. Walsh disembarked at a particularly dismal stop, carrying a large box that hadn't been with him when he left work. Vera followed, her natural stealth keeping her hidden as he navigated the maze-like alleys with surprising familiarity. When he turned down a particularly narrow passage, Vera pressed herself against a wall, peering carefully around the corner. What she witnessed stopped her breath. A group of small Vegarian children, their blue skin dull from malnutrition, their antennae drooping, emerged from makeshift shelters constructed from discarded shipping materials. Their faces transformed at the sight of Walsh, lighting up with unmistakable joy. "Mr. Eric," they cried in unison, rushing toward him. The human knelt, setting down his box. "Hey kiddos, brought you something." He opened the container, revealing food packages, juice containers, and what appeared to be simple medical supplies. The children gathered around, their movements suggesting both eagerness and the careful restraint of those accustomed to disappointment. "One at a time," Walsh said gently. "There's enough for everyone." Vira watched, transfixed, as this exhausted human methodically distributed the provisions, ensuring each child received an equal share. He knew their names. He asked about specific ailments. He listened to their stories with genuine interest. "Thule, how's that cough?" Walsh asked a tiny girl with a cracked antenna. "Better, Mr. Eric," she replied, clutching her juice box like treasure. "Good. I brought more of that medicine that helped the last time." As the scene unfolded, something shifted in Vira's chest, a sensation so unfamiliar that it took her several moments to identify it. Shame. Her corporation employed thousands of workers on wages she'd always considered fair by market standards. Yet here was one of those workers, spending what must be nearly his entire income to feed alien children who weren't even his species. When one of the smallest children stumbled while approaching, Walsh caught him with gentle hands. "Whoa there, buddy." "Careful." The tenderness in that simple gesture pierced Vera's carefully constructed worldview. This human, this supposedly inferior species that her people had reluctantly accepted into their economic sphere, possessed a quality that had become rare among her own kind: compassion without expectation of return. As Walsh began telling the children a story, his expressive face animated despite obvious fatigue, Vira made a decision that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. She would help these children, and she would discover what made this human so different from anyone she had ever known. Vira couldn't sleep that night. The image of Eric Walsh kneeling in the filth of Blue Sector, surrounded by adoring alien children, had burned itself into her mind. She paced her luxurious penthouse, the automated systems adjusting the ambient lighting to her restless movements. Computer access personnel file, Eric Walsh. The holographic display materialized before her. Human male, age 32, Earthborn, hired 3 standard years ago as a cargo handler. Exemplary service record, no family listed, no emergency contacts, no family. That detail snagged her attention. Most employees had someone, parents, siblings, partners. Walsh existed in isolation, at least officially. By morning, Vera had formulated a plan. She transferred a substantial sum from her personal accounts to an untraceable financial instrument, then summoned her most discreet assistant. "Pax, I need these items delivered to this location in Blue Sector," she said, handing over a detailed list. "Ensure there's no connection to me or the corporation. The deliveries must appear anonymous." The reptilian assistant's inner eyelids flickered, his species equivalent of raised eyebrows. "Understood, Ms. Nextari. When should this occur?" "Tomorrow, after the human Walsh leaves the area." For the next week, Vira maintained her usual schedule, but her attention remained divided. During meetings, she found herself wondering if Eric would notice the improvements to the children's shelter. The reinforced walls, the clean bedding, the stockpile of nutritionally balanced food. On the 8th day, she couldn't resist. Disguised once more, she followed him to Blue Sector. The change was immediate and obvious. The children looked healthier, their antennae more vibrant. The makeshift shelter had been transformed with proper insulation and weather protection. And in the center of it all stood Eric Walsh, his expression a fascinating mix of confusion and cautious hope. "Mr. Eric," a small girl, Tuli, Vera remembered, tugged at his hand. "Look what the sky spirits brought us." Eric knelt, his weathered hand gentle on the child's shoulder. "These aren't from sky spirits, kiddo. Somebody real is helping us." "Who?" another child asked. "I don't know," Eric admitted, his gaze sweeping the area with surprising intensity. "But I intend to find out." For a moment, his eyes seemed to lock directly on Vera's hiding place, and she felt a jolt of something unfamiliar, a thrill that wasn't entirely unpleasant. She ducked deeper into the shadows, her heart's racing. The next day, Vira called Eric to her office. He arrived precisely on time, his work clothes exchanged for what was clearly his best outfit, a simple shirt and pants that, while clean, showed signs of repeated mending. "Mr. Walsh," she greeted him, deliberately cool. "Do you know why I've called you here?" His ocean blue eyes met hers directly, unusual for a subordinate of any species. "No, ma'am. Your performance reviews are consistently excellent," she said, circling her desk to stand closer to him. "I'm curious why someone with your capabilities hasn't applied for advancement." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "The current position suits my needs. Double shifts at base pay suit your needs?" She raised an eyebrow ridge, the Vigarian equivalent of skepticism. "They do." The directness of his response intrigued her. Most employees would grovel, express ambition, or at least show curiosity about potential promotion. "I've authorized a 15% increase in your compensation," she said, watching him carefully, "retroactive to the beginning of this pay cycle." Something flashed in his eyes, not gratitude but calculation. Thank you, Ms. Nextari. That's unexpected. Considerate recognition of your contribution. She moved closer, noticing how he stood his ground despite their proximity. The corporation values loyalty. His scent reached her, not the artificial fragrances her own kind used, but something earthy and distinctly human. It triggered an unexpected response in her biology that she filed away for later examination. Is there anything else you need, Ms. Nextari? His voice remained steady, professional, but she caught the slight acceleration in his breathing. Not at present, Mr. Walsh. She returned to her desk, dismissing him with a gesture. You may continue your duties. After he left, Vira activated her private terminal. Computer, allocate an additional surveillance package to subject Walsh, Eric, priority level 3. The following evening, she watched through remote feeds as Eric returned to the children with even more supplies than before. His face showed bewilderment as he examined the new medical kits that had mysteriously appeared since his last visit. Someone's watching us, he told the oldest child, a boy of perhaps 9 cycles. Be careful what you say and do when I'm not here. The child nodded solemnly. Is it bad people, Mr. Eric? Eric frowned, scanning the alley with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. I don't think so. But in my experience, nothing comes without a price. Vira felt an unexpected pang at his words. Was that how humans view generosity? As a transaction with hidden costs? She increased the anonymous deliveries, uncurious how far she could push before he took action. Better nutrition, educational materials, even simple toys. 2 weeks later, she got her answer when security alerted her to an unauthorized presence in the corporate archives at 2 a.m. The surveillance feed showed Eric Walsh moving with surprising stealth through restricted areas, accessing terminal after terminal. He was hunting for his mysterious benefactor, and Vira found herself smiling at the challenge. The security system bathed the archives in a soft blue glow as Eric moved between terminals, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with surprising dexterity. He'd almost accessed the financial records when the lights suddenly brightened to full intensity. Impressive, came a familiar voice from behind him. Most humans can't bypass our biometric scanners. Eric froze, then slowly turned to face Vira Nextari. She stood in the doorway, wearing a simple silver robe that accentuated the iridescent blue of her skin. Her antennae were fully extended, a sign of heightened alertness among Vigarians. Ms. Nextari, he acknowledged, straightening to his full height. No point denying what he was doing. Breaking into corporate archives carries a minimum 5-year sentence on Vega Prime, she said, moving closer. Care to explain yourself, Mr. Walsh? His jaw tightened. Someone's been interfering with my kids in Blue Sector. I needed to know who and why. Your kids, her antenna twitched with interest. They're Vigarian orphans. Species doesn't matter. They're mine now. The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent an unexpected shiver through Vira's nervous system. She circled him slowly, noting how his eyes tracked her movement with the wariness of a cornered predator. And you suspected corporate involvement? The supplies weren't random. Too targeted. Someone knew exactly what we needed. His gaze narrowed. Someone who's been watching us. Vira stopped directly before him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his human body. And if I told you I was that someone? The surprise that flashed across his face was quickly replaced by suspicion. Why would the CEO of Nextari Holdings care about street orphans? Perhaps for the same reason a human cargo handler would spend his earnings feeding alien children. She tilted her head. You intrigue me, Eric Walsh. I'm not interesting, he countered. I just do what needs doing. That's precisely what makes you interesting. She moved closer still, noting how he held his ground despite their proximity. Humans are a contradiction. Your species is considered primitive by Galactic Council standards, yet you display qualities my kind have all but forgotten. His scent enveloped her, that earthy, distinctly human aroma that triggered responses in her biology she'd never experienced with males of her own species. What qualities? He asked, his voice dropping to a lower register. Compassion without calculation, generosity without agenda. She reached out, her blue fingers hovering just above his chest. It's fascinating. The tension between them shifted, electric and dangerous. Eric's breathing had changed, becoming deeper, and Vira found her own respiratory system synchronizing with his. "So you've been following me," he said. "Watching me." Interfering. "Helping," she corrected. "Those children needed more than one human could provide, no matter how dedicated." "Why the secrecy? Why not approach me directly?" Vira's antenna curled slightly, a gesture of amusement. "Would you have accepted help from the corporate executive you probably despise?" A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "Probably not." "Exactly." She finally allowed her fingers to make contact with his chest, feeling the solid warmth beneath the thin fabric of his shirt. "Humans are stubborn." The touch seemed to break something in him. His hand moved with surprising speed, capturing her wrist, not roughly but firmly. "What do you want from me, Vira?" The use of her first name, without title or formality, sent another pleasurable shock through her system. "I want to understand what drives you," she admitted. "No one does something for nothing." His laugh was short and bitter. "That's where you're wrong. Some things are done simply because they're right." The concept was so foreign to her cultural understanding that she found herself momentarily speechless. In Vegarian society, all interactions were carefully calculated exchanges of value. The idea of acting without expectation of return was revolutionary. Eric released her wrist, but didn't step back. "So what happens now? Am I fired? Arrested?" "Neither," she said, making a decision. "I have a proposition." His eyebrow raised. "I'm listening." "Work with me." "Officially? Help me create a proper program for those children and others like them." She moved even closer, their bodies nearly touching. "Your compassion. My resources. Think what we could accomplish." The air between them seemed to vibrate with possibility and something more primal. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" he asked, voice husky. "The satisfaction of doing what's right," she replied, deliberately using his own logic. "And perhaps a chance to explore these fascinating human contradictions more thoroughly." The invitation in her words was unmistakable. For a moment, neither moved. Then Eric's hand came up to trace the contour of her face. His touch, sending cascades of sensation through nerve endings, evolved for an entirely different species contact. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured even as he leaned closer. "Probably," she agreed, her antenna curling toward him in the Vegarian gesture of intimate interest. "Most revolutionary ideas are." When their lips finally met, the biochemical reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Vegarians didn't kiss. The concept was uniquely human. But Vira found herself responding instinctively, her body recognizing something her conscious mind couldn't have anticipated. The archives, with their sterile environment and security monitors, faded from awareness as they surrendered to an attraction that defied both corporate hierarchy and interspecies convention. Hours later, as they lay entwined in the privacy of her executive suite, Vira traced the unfamiliar contours of his human form with wondering fingers. "You realize this complicates everything," Eric said, his voice a rumble against her skin. "Complexity is the foundation of progress," she replied, resting her head against his chest to hear the fascinating rhythm of his single heart. "And I've never been afraid of progress." The morning light filtered through the polarized windows of Vira's executive suite, casting geometric patterns across the rumpled bedding. Eric sat at the edge, pulling on his boots, his back a landscape of lean muscle that Vira found herself wanting to memorize. "You're staring," he said without turning. "Vegarians consider intense observation a compliment," she replied, her antenna curling with amusement. "Though I suspect humans feel differently." He glanced over his shoulder, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Depends who's doing the observing." The easy intimacy between them felt both natural and impossible, a contradiction that seemed to define everything about their relationship. "I need to tell you something," Eric said, his expression growing serious, "about why I'm really on Vega Prime." Vira sat up, the sheets falling away from her blue-hued form. "I assumed employment opportunities." "Partially." He turned fully toward her, ocean eyes clouded with memory. 3 years ago on Earth, I had a family. A wife, Emma. A daughter, Sarah. We lived near the manufacturing complex of Helix Industries. Something in his tone made Vira's secondary heart stutter. Had? There was an accident, chemical leak. The official report called it containment failure due to unforeseen circumstances. Bitterness edged his words. 23 people died, including Emma and Sarah. They were just gone while I was at work. Vera moved beside him, her hand finding his. Eric, The company paid settlements. Avoided prosecution, business as usual. His fingers tightened around hers. I tracked the supply chain, followed the money. It led here to Vega Prime, to a subsidiary that provided substandard containment materials to save costs. A cold realization washed over her. A subsidiary of Nextari Holdings? He nodded once. Vega Tech Materials. I came here to find proof, to expose what happened. And instead, you found orphans who needed you, she finished softly. They reminded me of Sarah. Different species, but the same innocence. He looked directly into her eyes. I never expected to find you either. Before Vira could respond, her communication terminal chimed urgently. Priority message from Director Krell, announced the automated system. Display, she commanded. The stern face of her chief financial officer materialized above the terminal. Ms. Nextari, the board has called an emergency session at 9 a.m. Your presence is mandatory. His eyes flicked briefly to Eric before returning to her. It concerns unauthorized financial activities and inappropriate fraternization. The message ended abruptly. Well, Vira said, her voice carefully controlled, it appears our relationship has been noticed. Eric stood, fully dressed now. Will they fire you? Unlikely. The corporation bears my family name. Her antenna straightened, a sign of determination. But they can make things difficult, very difficult. I should go. He moved toward the door. No, her voice stopped him. We face this together. I need to show you something first. 30 minutes later, they stood in Vira's private office as she accessed a secure database. After our encounter last night, I initiated an investigation into Vegatech Materials. She brought up a series of documents. The subsidiary was acquired during my father's tenure. I had no direct knowledge of its operations. Eric studied the scrolling information. But now you do. Yes, she highlighted several sections. The materials were indeed substandard. Corners were cut. Profits were prioritized over safety. Her antenna drooped with genuine regret. Your family died because of my corporation's negligence. He absorbed this in silence, his face unreadable. There's more, she continued, bringing up another file. While investigating Vegatech, I discovered unusual payment patterns in Blue Sector. Large sums moving through shell companies, ultimately traced to several high-ranking Vegarian officials. What kind of payments? Bribes, I believe, connected to what appears to be systematic child trafficking. Eric's expression hardened. The orphans? Not random orphans, Vira confirmed. Deliberately created ones. Children separated from families, documents destroyed, then filtered into various markets. His fists clenched. And these officials are connected to your board? 3 of them, including Director Krell. She closed the files. I believe they have discovered my interest in Blue Sector and are moving to neutralize me before I uncover their operation. The board meeting is a trap, Eric concluded. Most likely. She touched his arm. I'm sorry about your family, Eric. I can't undo what happened, but I can help you expose the truth and stop what's happening to these children. He studied her for a long moment. Why would you risk everything for this? For me? Because you showed me what it means to do something simply because it's right. She moved closer, her hand finding his face. My species prides itself on evolutionary superiority, yet you humans possess something we've lost, an innate moral compass that doesn't require calculation. The tenderness in her touch contrasted with the steel in her voice as she added, and because these corrupt bastards have operated under my family's name long enough. Eric's laugh was unexpected. You know, for an alien, you're starting to sound remarkably human. I'll take that as the highest compliment, she replied, her antenna curling toward him affectionately. Their lips met briefly, a moment of connection, before the storm they both knew was coming. "So what's the plan?" Eric asked as they separated. Vira's expression turned predatory in a distinctly Vigarian way. "We give the board exactly what they don't expect. The truth, delivered with uniquely human directness. And the children? We'll need evidence of the trafficking operation. Concrete proof we can take to the Galactic Council if necessary." She accessed her terminal again. "I've been monitoring unusual transport patterns in Blue Sector. Tonight appears to be a major movement." Eric nodded, his face set with determination. "Then tonight we'll be there." As they prepared to part ways, Eric to his regular shift to avoid suspicion, Vira to her board meeting, he caught her hand one last time. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I came to Vega Prime, seeking justice, but I found something I never expected to find again." "What's that?" she asked. His smile held both sadness and hope. "A reason to look forward to tomorrow." The boardroom of Nextari Holdings gleamed with polished surfaces and subtle displays of wealth. 7 Vigarian directors sat around the oval table, their antenna positions conveying various degrees of hostility and judgment as Vira entered. Director Krell, a tall Vigarian with unusually dark blue skin, spoke first. "Ms. Nextari, thank you for joining us. We have serious concerns about recent irregularities." Vira took her position at the head of the table, her posture deliberately relaxed. "By irregularities, I assume you mean my personal financial activities and private relationships." "Among other things," per Director Mela, her antenna flicking with false sympathy, "your father built this corporation on principles of profit maximization and strategic growth. Your recent humanitarian interests seem at odds with those principles. And your relationship with a human labor is beneath your station," added Director Pren. "Interspecies dalliances are one thing, but a permanent employee? The optics are concerning." Vira studied each face, mentally cataloging who seemed genuinely outraged versus those showing calculated opposition. 3 of them, Krell, Mela, and Tarn, were directly implicated in the trafficking operation according to her investigation. "I wasn't aware my personal life required board approval," she replied coolly. "As for my financial activities, my personal accounts are separate from corporate holdings." "Not when they affect corporate reputation," Krell countered. "Your charity work in Blue Sector has drawn unwanted attention to areas better left unexamined." The threat in his words was barely veiled. "Interesting choice of phrase," Mvira said, activating her personal data pad. "Perhaps we should discuss exactly what activities in Blue Sector might damage our corporate reputation." She projected a series of financial transactions onto the main display. These payments, for instance, routed through 17 shell companies before reaching accounts controlled by directors Krell, Mela, and Tarn. The boardroom erupted in chaos as the accused directors shouted denials while others demanded explanations. Vira let the storm rage, watching the factions form exactly as she'd anticipated. Meanwhile, across the city in Blue Sector, Eric moved silently through shadow-draped alleys. The micro-transmitter in his ear carried Vira's voice from the boardroom, while his wrist device recorded everything he witnessed. "I'm approaching the warehouse," he whispered, knowing the subvocal microphone would pick up his words. "Security looks heavier than expected." 4 armed Vigarians guarded a nondescript building, their weapons not the standard issue of corporate security, but military-grade pulse rifles. Through a gap in the loading bay doors, Eric glimpsed movement inside, small blue forms being herded into transport containers. "They're moving the children now," he reported. "Looks like at least 20, maybe more." In the boardroom, Vira received her transmission through her discreet earpiece while maintaining her confrontation with the board. "These transactions coincide with disappearances of children in Blue Sector," she continued, displaying more data. "Children who mysteriously become orphans before entering various distribution channels." "This is absurd," Krell snarled, his antenna rigid with anger. "You have no proof these payments are connected to any illegal activity." "Perhaps not yet," Vira conceded, "but the Galactic Council's anti-trafficking unit might find the correlation interesting enough to launch a full investigation." Director Tarn, who had remained silent until now, suddenly stood. "This meeting is a waste of time. I move to temporarily suspend Ms. Nextari's executive privileges pending a full audit of her activities. I second, Mela added quickly. Vyra had expected this maneuver. What she hadn't expected was the urgent whisper in her ear. Vyra, I've been spotted. Security's closing in. There are more children than we thought, and… Eric's transmission cut off abruptly. Her primary heart seemed to freeze while her secondary one raced. She couldn't abandon the boardroom confrontation. It was their best chance to expose the operation, but Eric was in immediate danger. Before we vote, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady, you should know that evidence is being gathered at this very moment. Evidence that will be automatically transmitted to authorities if anything happens to me or my associate. It was a bluff, but one she delivered with perfect conviction. What associate? Krell demanded. As if in answer, the boardroom display suddenly changed, showing a live feed from Eric's recording device. The image was chaotic. Clearly he was running, being pursued, but it clearly showed children being loaded into containers. What is this? Gasped one of the uninvolved directors. This, Vyra said grimly, is what certain board members have been hiding in Blue Sector. The feed abruptly cut out, but not before capturing a clear image of a transport container bearing the discrete logo of a Nextari Holdings subsidiary. The boardroom exploded into accusations and denials. In the confusion, Vyra slipped away, activating her emergency protocols as she moved. Security override Nextari Alpha, she commanded her wrist device. Track Eric Walsh's transmitter and dispatch corporate security team to that location. Authorization for lethal force approved. Her personal transport was waiting, its engine humming to life as she approached. Blue Sector, Warehouse District, she ordered the automated system. Maximum speed. As the vehicle accelerated into the sky lanes, Vyra accessed the corporate security network. Eric's transmitter showed him still moving, which gave her hope, but the signal was weak. The journey to Blue Sector took 11 excruciating minutes. Each second stretched her nerves tighter as she imagined what might be happening to Eric and to the children he'd tried to save. When her transport finally descended near the warehouse, she found chaos. Corporate security had arrived and engaged with the traffickers. Pulsefire illuminated the night in strobing flashes of blue and green. Vyra spotted a familiar figure crouched behind a cargo container. A small Vigarian child clutched protectively against his chest. Even from a distance, she could see blood staining his shirt. Eric, she called, rushing toward him despite the danger. He looked up, relief washing over his face. Vyra! They were ready for us. This isn't just trafficking, it's bigger. I found documentation linking this operation to the Orion Syndicate. The Orion Syndicate, the most notorious criminal organization in the sector, with tentacles reaching into governments across multiple systems. You're hurt, she said, noticing the wound on his shoulder. I'll live. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her antenna quiver. But we've stumbled into something much more dangerous than corporate corruption. The child in his arms whimpered, and he automatically soothed her with a gentle touch that made Vyra's hearts constrict with emotion. We need to get you both to safety, she said, helping him to his feet. Not just us. He nodded toward the warehouse. There are at least 30 more children inside, and I saw something else. Data terminals with information that could expose the entire network. A decision crystallized in Vyra's mind. My security team can handle the immediate threat, but we need that evidence. Eric nodded, understanding her intent without words. Together then, as they prepared to make their move, Vyra found herself struck by the human's unflinching courage. Despite being injured, despite being a single individual against a criminal syndicate, he never considered abandoning the children. You humans are remarkable creatures, she said softly. His smile was tight but genuine. We're stubborn that way. It's one of your better qualities, she replied, her hand finding his for a brief, affirming squeeze. Around them, the battle continued to rage, but in that moment, something profound and unshakable solidified between them. A bond forged in shared purpose and growing affection that neither corporate politics nor interstellar crime syndicates could sever. Pulse fire ricocheted off the metal container as Vyra and Eric crouched behind it, the small Vigarian child trembling between them. Stay here, Eric told the girl. his voice gentle despite the chaos. "We'll come back for you." Vira activated her wrist device, creating a small protective energy field around the container. This will keep her safe temporarily. They moved in tandem toward the warehouse entrance, ducking between shadows as the firefight between corporate security and the traffickers intensified. Eric winced as the movement aggravated his shoulder wound, but his determination never wavered. "The main terminal should be in the administrative section," he said. "Northwest corner, based on the building schematics." They had almost reached the entrance when a familiar voice called out from behind them. "How disappointing, Miss Nextari." They turned to find Director Krell standing with 4 heavily armed guards, their weapons trained on Vera and Eric. "I expected better from a Nextari," Krell continued, his antenna rigid with cold fury. "Your father understood the value of profitable arrangements. He would never have jeopardized everything for sentiment." "My father didn't traffic children," Vera spat. Krell's mouth twisted in what passed for a vegetarian smile. "Your father understood necessary compromises. The Orion Syndicate provides protection and market access that has made our shareholders very wealthy. The occasional resource allocation is a small price." "Resource allocation?" Eric stepped forward, rage evident in every line of his body. "They're children, you sick bastard!" One of the guards struck him with the butt of a rifle, sending him to his knees. Vera moved instinctively to his side, her antenna flaring with protective fury. "Humans," Krell sighed. "So emotional, so limited in their understanding of galactic economics." "I understand enough," Eric growled, blood trickling from his lip as he rose again. "I understand that creatures like you exist across the universe, putting profit above lives." "The same profit that built the corporation you work for," Krell countered. "The same profit that pays your wages." "Not anymore," Vera interjected. "As of this moment, I'm invoking Founders Protocol. As the last Nextari, I'm dissolving the current board and assuming direct control of all corporate assets." Krell's antenna twitched with alarm. "You can't do that without evidence of criminal activity by board members?" "I have that evidence." She nodded toward the warehouse. "And we're about to get more." "You'll never make it inside," Krell sneered. "And even if you did, the Syndicate's reach extends to the highest levels of the Galactic Council. There's nowhere you can take this evidence that will matter." A sudden explosion rocked the warehouse, sending everyone staggering. In the confusion, Eric grabbed Voiri and pulled her through the now breached entrance. "Now or never," he said, his eyes reflecting the fires burning around them. They raced through the chaotic interior, past crates of frightened children and battling security forces. In the northwest corner, they found the administrative office and the data terminal Eric had spotted earlier. "Cover me," he said, sliding behind the console. Vira took position at the door, her corporate security clearance giving her access to a weapon locker on the wall. Armed with a pulse pistol, she fired precise shots at traffickers attempting to reach the office. "Hurry," she called. "Krell will have reinforcements coming." "Almost there," Eric replied, his fingers flying across the interface. "This is bigger than we thought, Vira. The Syndicate has infiltrated governments across 3 sectors. There are facilities like this on 12 different worlds. Can you download it all?" "Already done." He held up a data crystal. "Everything we need to burn their operation to the ground." A new barrage of weapons fire forced Vera to duck. "We need to move. Get the children out." "There's a transport bay on the east side," Eric said, consulting the terminal. "If we can get the kids there." The ceiling above them groaned ominously as structural supports, weakened by the fighting, began to fail. "This place is coming down," Vira realized. "We need to evacuate, now." Working together, they began gathering children from their containers, guiding them toward the transport bay. Eric moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis, his calm voice reassuring the terrified youngsters. "Stay together. Hold hands. Follow Ms. Nextari." They had almost reached the transport bay when Krell appeared with his guards, blocking their path. "Enough of this," the director snarled. "The evidence stays here, along with all of you." Before either could respond, the building shuddered violently. A support beam crashed down, narrowly missing the children, but separating Vira and Eric from Krell. "Go!" Eric shouted to Vira. "Get the kids out! I'll handle Krell!" I'm not leaving you, she insisted. Trust me. His eyes held hers for a moment that seemed to stretch into infinity. I'll find you. Another section of ceiling collapsed, forcing her decision. Gathering the children, Vera led them to the waiting transport as Eric disappeared into the smoke toward Krell. The journey to Vera's secure residence was tense, her thoughts constantly returning to Eric. Had he escaped? Was he hurt? The data crystal felt heavy in her pocket, evidence that could bring down an interstellar criminal network, but worthless to her if Eric didn't return. Hours later, with the children safely settled in her home's guest quarters under security protection, Vira paced her living room. No word from Eric, no sign of pursuit. The uncertainty was unbearable. A soft alert from her security system broke the silence. Perimeter breach detected, the automated voice announced. Unknown device attached to primary transport. A tracking device, they'd been followed. Vira's tactical training kicked in. She activated the residence's defensive systems, moved the children to the secure core, and prepared for the inevitable assault. As she checked the weapon she'd brought from the warehouse, her communication device chimed with an incoming message. The text was simple. Evidence uploaded to all major news networks across 3 sectors. Too big to cover up now. Coming to you. Hold on. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed tension. Eric was alive, but the syndicate would be desperate now that their operation was exposed. They'd come for the witnesses, for the children, and for the human who had ruined them. As if on cue, her security system detected multiple approaching vehicles. Vira positioned herself at the main entrance, weapon ready. She thought of the children sleeping in her secure room, of the evidence now spreading across the galaxy, of the human who had changed everything with a simple, powerful conviction that doing the right thing needed no justification beyond itself. For the first time in her life, Vera Nextari found herself praying not to any deity, but to the universe itself, that a single remarkable human would find his way back to her before the coming storm broke. The first explosion hit the eastern perimeter of Vira's residence, rattling windows and triggering emergency containment fields. Through security feeds, she counted 6 assault vehicles surrounding the property, disgorging armed syndicate operatives in black tactical gear. Defensive Protocol Theta, she commanded the house system, prioritize core protection. Vira moved efficiently, checking her weapon and the residence's defensive capabilities. The children were secure in the central bunker, but the attacking force was larger than anticipated. She needed more time. A proximity alert chimed, but instead of another threat, the screen showed a battered transport approaching from the south, flying erratically but somehow evading syndicate detection. Eric. He landed on the auxiliary pad, stumbling from the transport with torn clothing and fresh bruises, but very much alive. Vira rushed to the secure entrance, relief flooding her system as the door slid open to reveal him. "You're late," she said, antenna quivering with emotion she couldn't fully express. "Traffic was hell," he replied with that uniquely human ability to joke in the face of danger. Then more seriously, "Krell didn't make it. Building collapse. But I got this." He held up a second data crystal. His personal records, names of every syndicate contact in the Galactic Council. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. "They're breaching the west entrance," Vera reported, pulling him inside. "Syndicate strike team, at least 20 operatives." Eric checked the weapon he'd acquired somewhere between the warehouse and her home. "The evidence is public now. Every news outlet across 3 sectors is running it. The syndicate can't stop the information, but they can eliminate witnesses. The children are their primary target," he finished, "along with us." They moved to the central security station, where Vira brought up a tactical display. "My security systems can hold them off temporarily, but we need reinforcements." "Already incoming," Eric said. "I contacted the Galactic Council's Special Response Division before coming here. Used Krell's authentication codes to verify the evidence. They dispatched forces immediately, but they're still 20 minutes out. We need to hold for 20 minutes against a syndicate kill team." Vira summarized, her antennas straightening with determination. "Acceptable odds." Eric's laugh was warm despite the circumstances. "I love how you calculate everything." The casual admission of love hung between them for a heartbeat before another explosion demanded their attention. West Barrier compromised, the house system announced, hostiles entering level 1. They moved in perfect coordination, Vira activating internal defense systems, while Eric established a defensive position, covering their approach to the core, where the children sheltered. "You know," Eric said as they prepared for the assault, "this isn't how I imagined our third date would go." Despite everything, Vira felt her antenna curl with amusement. "You've been counting our encounters as dates?" The warehouse raid was definitely a date by human standards. Very romantic. Explosions, gunfire, daring rescue. The first syndicate operatives appeared at the end of the corridor, and both Vira and Eric opened fire simultaneously. The precision of their coordination was remarkable, as if they'd fought together for years rather than hours. "If we survive this," Vira said between bursts of pulse fire, "I'll show you how Vigarians conduct proper courtship rituals." "Looking forward to it," Eric replied, taking down another operative with a well-placed shot. "Though I should warn you, I'm already pretty committed to this relationship." The fighting intensified as more syndicate forces breached the residence. Vira and Eric were forced to fall back to secondary positions, trading space for time as they protected the approach to the children. 5 minutes until council forces arrive," Eric announced, checking his communicator during a brief lull. Vera winced as pulse fire grazed her arm. "We may not have 5 minutes." The syndicate forces had adapted to the residence's defenses, using specialized equipment to bypass security measures. They were professionals, methodical in their approach. "I have an idea," Eric said suddenly. "The environmental systems. Can you flood the lower levels with cryogenic coolant?" Vira's antenna perked up as she grasped his plan. "Yes, but we'd lose most of the house systems." "Better than losing the children," he countered. She nodded, accessing the environmental controls. "Initiating emergency purge. Brace yourself." A harsh alarm sounded throughout the residence, followed by the hiss of supercooled gas flooding the lower levels. The temperature plummeted instantly, freezing the advancing syndicate operatives in place. In the sudden silence that followed, Eric and Vira shared a look of exhausted triumph. "Council forces approaching," the house system announced. "ETA 2 minutes." Eric slumped against the wall, the adrenaline drain making his injuries more apparent. Vera moved to him, her fingers gentle as she examined his wounds. "You need medical attention," she said. "I need you," he replied simply, his hand finding hers. "Everything else can wait." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within her, something that had been awakening since that first night she followed him to Blue Sector. When the Galactic Council forces finally arrived, they found Vira and Eric still in that position, hands intertwined, keeping watch over the children they had saved. 3 months later, Vera stood on the observation deck of Nextari Tower, watching the sunset paint Vega Prime's skyline in shades of amber and gold. The door slid open behind her, and she knew without turning who had entered. "The council's final verdict came through," Eric said, joining her at the window. 37 syndicate officials convicted, 12 corrupt council members removed, the trafficking network dismantled across all 3 sectors. "And the children?" His smile was warm, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way that made her antenna curl with affection. "The New Beginnings Foundation has been officially recognized. Full funding approved. The first residential facility opens next month." Vira turned to face him fully. In the 3 months since the syndicate attack, Eric had transformed from a cargo handler to the Director of Human Vigarian Relations for the restructured Nextari Holdings. The position suited him, his natural compassion balanced with a steel-hard determination to protect the vulnerable. "Your idea to redirect 15% of corporate profits to rehabilitation programs was inspired," she said. "The board actually approved it without argument." "Amazing what a complete replacement of corrupt directors can accomplish," he replied with a wry smile. Vera moved closer, her fingers tracing the now-healed scar on his shoulder. "Have I mentioned today how remarkable you humans are?" "Only twice," he said, drawing her against him. "Your fascination with my species is showing, Ms. Nextari." "Not the species," she corrected. "Just one particular specimen." Their lips met in what had become a familiar ritual, the biochemical reaction no less potent for its repetition. When they separated, Eric's expression had turned serious. "I've been thinking about what you said, about doing the right thing without calculation." He took a small box from his pocket. This is probably terrible timing by Vegarian standards, but humans tend to follow their hearts rather than their schedules. Inside the box was a ring, a simple band of iridescent metal that caught the light like Vegarian skin. On Earth, this symbolizes a permanent partnership, he explained. I know interspecies marriages are rare, and there would be complications, but… Vera silenced him with another kiss, her antenna fully extended in the Vegarian expression of joy. Yes, she said simply when they parted. Later that night, as they lay together in the privacy of their shared quarters, Vera reflected on the strange path that had led them to this moment. How a simple decision to follow a mysterious employee had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless children across 3 sectors. What are you thinking? Eric asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her iridescent skin. That sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to care, she replied. You taught me that. And you taught me that one person really can change an entire system, he said, even if that person is an intimidatingly beautiful alien CEO. Vera laughed, the sound mingling with his in the darkness. Outside their window, Vega Prime continued its eternal orbit. But within the walls they had built together, something new and unprecedented had taken root. A bridge between worlds that began with curiosity and blossomed into love. And in the secure wing of their residence, 34 former orphans slept peacefully, their futures now as bright as the stars visible through the viewport. All because a human man had worked double shifts and an alien woman had decided to follow him.